Welcome to Make It Last, helping you keep your legal ducks in a row and your nest egg secure, with your host, Victor Medina, an estate planning and elder law attorney and certified financial planner.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Make It Last. I am your host, Victor Medina. I am so glad you have joined us this Saturday morning. It's bright and early if you're listening on the radio, but as you know, we also simulcast this as a podcast. So if you're interested in listening to this show at any time that isn't Saturday morning, you can go ahead and subscribe on iTunes or Android and just look for Make It Last with Victor Medina. You search for that, you see a little blue box, hit the subscribe button, and you will get this show automatically delivered to your device every week as soon as it's done being broadcast on the air. So I'm excited for today's show. I'll tell you, we are going to cover three subjects, a little different formats today than the way we normally do. Now, normally we cover one small topic in the first segment and then take a larger topic over segments 2 and 3, and we try to teach you a little bit about it and then, what's practical. So in this week, we're actually going to hit three different subjects, and the three different subjects are, we're going to cover the new GOP tax proposal, and so it's a couple of weeks old now, and so we're going to talk a little bit about what it means, because there's some important provisions in there, a lot of things that affect retirees. Then in the next segment, we're going to cover a new law about reverse mortgages. Now, on the show, I haven't really gone into reverse mortgages, in large part because I don't believe that they should factor into a retirement for reasons that I'll discuss in that second segment. But I am going to cover the new law and how it might affect you if you are considering a reverse mortgage. And then finally, in the last segment, I'm going to cover the question about should you hire a financial advisor. Many people are questioning whether or not they should have a financial advisor in their life, specifically in retirement. And we're going to give you two good reasons about why you should consider hiring a financial advisor, especially in retirement as you make that transition. So because we have so much to cover today, let's jump right in and talk a little bit about the new tax proposal. Now, the Republicans in the House essentially proposed a bill that they said is a reformation of the tax code, and there are provisions in there that change the income tax rates. So inside of there, you'll find that they have consolidated 7 tax brackets down to 4. They have sort of consolidated the 10 and the 15% bracket, which affects a lot of people in retirement, and they've made that a 12% bracket. And so the brackets, I guess, they keep using the same word there, but the brackets are basically down to 12, 25, 30, and 35. And so they've eliminated the top bracket of 39.8. And there are a bunch of other provisions inside of there, like the elimination of the estate tax over a number of years. It starts by doubling that current exemption from $5.6 million to $11.2. I don't know how many of our listeners have $11.2 million. My guess is not that many. In fact, the population kind of supports the idea that that's a really infinitesimal percentage of the people that are out there. But they do kind of raise the estate tax and then eliminate it over time. But there are actually two provisions in there that affect people in retirement in a pretty significant way. Now, one of them has to do with the elimination of the deduction for medical expenses. And so I got to tell you what that is in order for you to understand why it might impact you. Under the current law, the IRS allows individuals to deduct qualified medical expenses when that exceeds either 7.5% or 10% of the adjusted gross income for the year. And so what that means is that comes off as a line item deduction on the top when you cross that threshold. The cost to repeal that is about $10 billion per year. So the way to think about that is there's about $10 billion worth of deductions that are taken across the U.S. from it. And their new bill essentially eliminates the ability for individuals to deduct that, and that could have very major implications for households with really high healthcare costs. So the way it works is the IRS currently allows individuals to deduct preventative care, treatment, surgeries, dental and vision care as qualifying medical expenses. And it also, and this is really where kind of the rubber meets the road, it also qualifies like your long-term care expenses for chronically ill patients also qualify. So the medical expense deduction can be used to deduct things like assisted living and nursing home expenses, even certain home health care. So it's a big change. It's a big change. There are over 8.8 million households that filed income tax returns claiming the medical expense deduction. And so that's over 19% of all itemized returns and 5.8% of all returns filed in 2015, the last tax year that we have information for. We don't have the 2016 information quite yet. So if you have high medical costs and this bill passes, this could take a significant bite out of your finances. Now, I mentioned before that essentially you have to hit these certain thresholds. Now, until this year, you could have either hit 7.5% if you were 65 and older, or 10%. Now this year it's 10%. But you can only deduct that portion of medical expenses that exceeds your 10% of your AGI. And half of the people that claim this deduction reported income of $50,000 a year or less. And that can really affect people. If you think about people that are disabled, long-term disabilities, households with those kinds of family members, can they deduct all kinds of expenses not covered by insurance? And, that's really where the rubber meets the road, is that, your deduction here is in lieu of having insurance cover something. And so if you think about it, it's not that somebody's paying for expenses that are somehow covered by insurance. They're deducting it specifically because it's not covered by insurance. So for blind and deaf people, they could have deducted the cost of maintaining their service animal. People who have various kinds of prosthetics or high drug costs, those deductions are going to go away. And so families with disabled members may find themselves drowning in medical expenses, even if you have health insurance, because the health insurance doesn't cover everything. And it's sort of curious, that as much as the conservative platform has been pushing people to take health savings accounts, HSAs, with high medical insurance deductibles as a way of keeping the cost of insurance down, the ability to deduct those expenses on your taxes would go away. So for people that have high deductible health insurance, writing off the cost of those deductibles is no longer an option. And so kind of flies in the face of the recommendation to take that kind of insurance. And then, over half of the people taking medical deductions are 65 and over. I think the number is 55%. And if you include people that are 50 and over, so, right in the demographic of our listeners, their figure rises to 74%. So of the people that are 50 and over, 74% are the people taking the medical itemized deduction. Are those folks. And so they can include unreimbursed in-home care, assisted living, long-term care, even long-term care insurance premiums are no longer deductible. So those are going to force seniors to liquidate 401ks in order to pay. And because they're doing that, all of that money is taxable. And in the past, at least the medical expense deduction offset the taxable income created by liquidating those accounts. But by liquidating the 401ks, you can find yourself pushed further and further into higher tax brackets with no relief, making your money just not last as long. So look, this bill is far from final. The CBO still has to score it. That's the Congressional Budget Office. They have to estimate the long-term care costs. Then the Senate has got to introduce its version, and the two bills have to be reconciled. And then, of course, between now and then, lobbyists will be pressing their suits and going to visit all the congressional offices in droves in the coming weeks to make sure that their cases are heard, to include or remove various elements in the legislation. You can be sure things like the AARP and different patient advocacy groups will be among the lobbyists trying to move this around. So we're really not sure where it's going to go. I didn't cover another section that was going to help people that's being eliminated, which is the ability to deduct state income taxes off of it. So we're going to see what happens with this. Helping people with a medical deduction is very similar to helping people affected by hurricanes. People get hit by hurricanes all the time, and same thing with catastrophic illness. It's not anything that anyone can plan for, and to kind of make them pay for that by having to pay higher income taxes simply for an event that they couldn't control. It is I don't know that it's all that fair. Anyway, when we come back from the break, I'm going to cover the new law on reverse mortgages, and then we'll cover whether or not you should hire a financial advisor. So stay tuned for more information on the GOP bill in future episodes, and stay tuned to this program when we come back for the next two segments. We'll be right back.
As you get older, there are so many decisions to make around your legal, financial, and tax planning needs. Searching for the right people who you can trust and getting them all on the same page can be frustrating and exhausting. Turns out, now there's a better way. Medina Law Group is the only place where you can secure your total wealth with a one-stop shop for your estate, retirement, and tax planning needs. With over 15 years of experience and more financial credentials than you can shake a stick at, Victor Medina and his team offer a way to cover all of your planning needs under one roof. Whether you're concerned about getting your ducks in a row or securing your nest egg or both, Medina Law Group can give you the peace of mind you deserve to make sure you have all the angles covered with best-in-class planning. Call the experienced professionals at Medina Law Group at 609-818-0068 to learn more, including your chance to schedule a free consultation. You can also visit MedinaLawGroup.com to learn more about protecting your assets and the Medina Law Group team. For peace of mind and a solid foundation, contact Medina Law Group today.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. So the first segment, we talked about the new GOP tax bill. And in this segment, we're going to talk about the new rule on reverse mortgages. We are just besieged with new laws. It's a good thing that you are a listener of this program, because that way you can stay up to date on all of the changes that's going on. Now, listen, there are new rules that took an effect in October 2nd that are going to raise upfront costs for homeowners seeking a reverse mortgage, and they're going to reduce the maximum loan amounts for most. And so, the question is, should we even be considering a reverse mortgage? Now, I have to tell you my personal opinion on this, and my personal opinion is that a reverse mortgage has a very small place, if any, in a retirement plan. The idea that you can liquidate your equity in a home and use that to fund retirement as a reverse mortgage, as opposed to a downsizing, is very difficult for me to stomach and advise. And so when people ask us about it, we typically say that it's not a great idea. And so let me explain what it is, and then we'll talk about the new law changes. So a reverse mortgage is a form of a federally backed loan. All right. So it's important to know that the reason why people write these, or the lenders write these, is because there is a federal law that insures the mortgage company against losses. And so the way that it works is that you take your equity in your home and you turn it into cash. And in exchange for that, you don't have to make any payments. So the first rule is that you have to be 62 or older. Okay. And if you're 62 or older and you are the primary, and that's your primary residence, you can't do it off of an investment property. And then there are some rules about how the fact that you can't move out during that process. If that's the situation, you can apply for a reverse mortgage. Now, when you get the reverse mortgage, first of all, there's some rules to how you qualify for it. For instance, you have to take a pre-education program. So you have to go in and be educated on it. And it's sort of like it's a click-through. You don't have to take a test at the end demonstrating superior knowledge. But this is actually a point of contention for me, because this is a sophisticated financial instrument. And the way that it works has the potential to really devastate somebody's retirement if they don't understand it. And the idea that someone can go, so especially somebody who's a senior who, is very nervous about where retirement's going to lead, they're latching on to this reverse mortgage as a buoy. It's a life preserver, and they're thinking about it as a way to save their retirement. And, for instance, there's no requirement in the education that you go visit with a competent financial advisor to have them tell you whether or not it's appropriate. The education is all self-driven, and it's just a way of covering lawsuits later, because, people were claiming that they were hoodwinked by reverse mortgage brokers. And so the education requirement is a way of saying, well, we gave them an opportunity to kind of learn on their own. Well, folks, you've been with me now for, over half a year, and heard me rail about financial advisors, who hoodwink their clients by selling them products that are inappropriate. Guess what? It's right there in the mortgage business as well. And when it comes to reverse mortgages, the commissions that are available for that, are nearly as attractive as those for life insurance products. And so when it comes to whether or not somebody should be buying a reverse mortgage, there's a bunch of people in that industry that are there just to make money. And so if they can convince you to kind of do a reverse mortgage, they can make a lot of money off of that, even if it's not in your best interest. The reverse mortgage broker has got no fiduciary obligation to make sure that it's the right thing for you. In fact, most of the times they don't know the financial advisement from their, from financial, I don't know. One is that they don't have any idea. They don't have any idea whether or not it should fit in part of a financial plan. They're there to sell you a product. And the idea that you take this education course and all of a sudden you're ready to make your own decisions on that, it's folly. It doesn't help. In any event, you've heard me. Great. I railed on that for 2 minutes. The way the reverse mortgage works, so that we can eventually get to the new law, is that the interest charges on the mortgage, right? You're going to borrow money, and you can take that money, by the way, in a lump sum. You can take that money as monthly income for life, or you can use it as a line of credit. And those have been the three ways that it's gotten done, and you can select any of those three. The interest charges on the loan are added to the debt that you've taken out, which doesn't have to be paid off until you die or you no longer use that property as a primary residence, either because you've moved out or because you sell it. Okay. So as long as you keep up your taxes, insurance, the maintenance on the home, the company that lent you the money can't call the loan, and they can't ever recover more than the home gets in a sale, even if the debt is larger, as a way of sort of protecting your other assets. Now, as to protect the lenders against this kind of loss, the federal government has some limitations on the program. They're going to limit the amount that you can borrow, and they maintain an insurance fund with premiums paid by you, the borrower. All right. And so they're looking to, which is HUD, by the way, HUD is looking to oversee, kind of shore up this insurance fund. So the way that works is that as of October 2nd, the maximum loan amount, okay, is reduced. It used to be that an applicant might have been able to borrow 60 or 70% of the property's value. They're going to get something less. And the exact amount is going to vary by borrower because the limits are based on your age and the loan rates as well as the property value. So as you get older, all right, you can borrow more. And if you're younger, you borrow less because the interest would accrue over that long time. Now, if you're, on death's door, it's the last year, and actuarially speaking, they're going to let you borrow the maximum amount because you won't have a lot of time for interest to accrue. So based on the property value and what the loan rates are, your number, what's called a principal limit factor, or a PLF, that's going to change and it's going to be reduced. Second, HUD used to charge an upfront insurance premium as part of the cost based on the amount that you took out. And so if you borrowed less than 60% of the maximum, then they'd only charge you 0.5%. So let's illustrate this. If it was, let's say that there was a $200,000 home and the maximum you could have borrowed was $150,000. Okay, so about 3/4 of it. If you only borrowed 60% of that or less. So if you only borrowed $90,000 or less, you used to pay 0.5% of a fee. And so the way that would work on the 0.5%, you pay about $450 in order to get that up and running. All right, good. And if you took more than 60%, you'd pay 2.5%. So basically it meant that you would always try to take 60% of the maximum or less, right? So if you took $90,000 and $1, you'd go 2.5% against that, and you'd basically be taking out about $2,200. Okay, so the difference between $450 and $2,200. Now, under the new rules, the fee is 2% for everybody. So to take out a reverse mortgage is 2%, 2%, 2%, 2%, 2% of what you borrow. So on that $90,000 example, you're going to pay $1,800. Whether you took $89,999 or $90,001, and so there's no break for people that are making maybe a little bit of a smarter decision. In addition to doing that, there's some upside, which is the HUD reduced a separate annual insurance premium to 0.5% of the debt from 1.25. So it used to be 1.25 that you had to take out as an insurance, and that's down to 0.5%. So a swing of about 0.75, but for mostly everybody, the increase to 2% was double that, right? So they're going to have to pay more. Since the premium was generally added to the debt that you owed rather than paying from the assets, the reduction in this in separate insurance means that your debt's going to grow more slowly, leaving more equity. So basically, here's how it's going to shake out. For most people, experts, including this one, agree that the reverse mortgage is now less appealing. Okay, because for the people that are taking it as a line of credit, tapping it in emergencies is less attractive because you're going to have to use that credit line. You have to pay the premiums on the credit line whether or not you use it. Now, if you took it as a lump sum, you pay your percentages and you move on. But a lot of people took that as a standby line of credit, and that's really, just as a way to kind of insure against catastrophic losses. That's going to go down and go away as something that's attractive to do because you're going to have to pay the premiums whether or not you borrow the money. And so I'm going to go back to my first thing, which, as I said, is for most people, reverse mortgages don't make sense. Now, we might do a follow-up show on reverse mortgages. If people are interested, drop me a line about that. But if you're considering it, my professional advice, don't. consider something else. Very rare circumstances in which we recommend it. All right, when we come back, we're going to go with our last segment, which is should you be hiring a financial advisor? I'm going to give you 2 reasons to consider one that might be a little bit different than what you think in terms of investment management. It ain't that. All right, so when we come back, we'll talk about that. Stick with us here on Make It Last.
Just about every working American stays focused on the ultimate goal, retirement. But planning for it can come with a lot of uncertainty. Do I have adequate savings? Have I invested enough? Have I invested too much? What's the right thing to do? If you're one of the millions of Americans asking these questions, let financial expert Victor Medina help you make sense of it all. Victor is a certified financial planner and retirement income specialist who can help you set the strategy with a unique planning process that centers on you. By taking an in-depth look at your retirement timeline, goals you want to achieve, and what you have saved, Victor and his staff can help you figure out how to get the most out of retirement. Retirement is the biggest financial decision you will make. Putting the right plan in place and sticking to it is the smartest decision anyone can ever make. To learn more, visit Private Client Capital Group online at privateclientcapitalgroup.com and start down the path of securing your total wealth today.
All right, welcome back to Make It Last. We've been talking about the new GOP tax bill, and then we talked about reverse mortgages, and now we're going to talk about whether or not you should consider hiring a financial advisor. Now listen, I'm a financial advisor as well as an estate planning attorney, and so you're going to listen to this segment saying, of course he's going to say hire a financial advisor. And listen, of course I'm going to say hire a financial advisor. I just am. I think you should be getting professional counsel no matter what the circumstances are. I go for professional counseling for things like property and casualty insurance. I don't know everything there is to know about that. I hire a professional to get that done, and I rely on that professional because it's folly for me to think that that I am going to know everything about it. What do they say about the attorney that is his own lawyer? He's got a fool for a client. I think the same thing in most of these professional settings. There's just too much to know these days. In any event, I'm going to kind of make the case for why you should consider it. And I think there's 2 reasons beyond investment management. But let's knock out investment management first, because a lot of people look at the cost of a financial advisor. Now, most of the top ones, right, are making their money as a fee of your assets under management. That's the fiduciaries, the people who are the product sales folks, the people that are selling you something. They make a commission off of what you buy. They make a commission off the mutual fund. They're not working as a fiduciary. They're still making money, but they're compromised in their advice. So let's just stick right now to the world of people that aren't compromised in their advice by conflicts of interest and actually are looking out for your best interest. And even they are going to charge an amount because they got to make a living, right? All got to make a living. Okay. So that's usually a percentage of your assets under management. And that percentage can range depending on how much you have with that advisor. Now, when we get to trying to figure out whether or not it's worth it, some people look at the returns as a way to gauge whether or not they're making more money. If I'm going to pay you 1%, 1.5%, annually, are you going to be making more than that? And some conclusion that people reach from time to time is, well, I can invest. And by the way, I've been reading all of this stuff about index funds. And so if all of the education says go into an index fund, I'm just going to go straight into an index fund and I don't need an advisor in order to help me. Well, there are a couple of reasons why you're going to want to rethink that position. The first is that most people are incapable of judging whether or not the index that they are in or the investment they're in is smart or good. Just because something is labeled as an index doesn't necessarily mean that it's right for you. And so we've had stories of people that are 75% in an S&P index fund and 25% in another index fund, and then they think that they're well diversified. Well, an index is not diversification. It's a representation of a small sliver of investments. And so if you look at that and are like, well, I'm totally diversified, I've got my index funds. No, all you're doing is tracking another index. Now, that might be right or wrong, but you may not be represented in the asset class that you should be represented as part of a diversified portfolio. There's a way to be in the 8 asset classes to make sure that you're properly represented. Oh, and by the way, keep rebalancing that as it moves out in and out. Okay. So while index is a way of getting representation in a particular asset class, it is not a way of being diversified per se. And in fact, there are some index funds that are actively managed, based on the fact that they're tracking an index that is active in what it's doing. So you got to figure out whether or not you have overlap in the indices, whether or not there's gaps. What about international representation? Domestic market isn't the only markets out there. So I don't know. You may want to think about that again. They're you're not as good looking, charming, or as good a driver as you think you are. And it's the same thing when it comes to investing abilities. Now, put that issue aside because I said that I would. I think there's two additional reasons that you might want to think about working with an advisor, and basically taxes and spouses. So many retirees have got two or more different kinds of savings accounts. They've got a taxable account that may represent after-tax savings. They've got tax-deferred accounts. They might have Roths. They might be factoring IRAs, pensions, Social Security. Essentially, they're looking at lots of different buckets. Each of those buckets are taxed differently. And ensuring that your nest egg lasts as long as you do, tagline for Make It Last, right, is probably the biggest financial challenge that you face in retirement. And figuring out how to tap these various assets in the most tax efficient way is crucial to doing that, because no matter what the tax code is, go back to segment 1, there are going to be income taxes that are going to be due. Right, the federal government has to collect their income taxes, and those tax rates are going to change over time, and they're going to be impacted by what assets you pull out of which account. So making sure that you do that efficiently is a total value of an advisor, because they can tell you where to pull from, and the small amount that they charge versus the additional taxable income is a tremendous return on investment. If they save you from going from the 25% bracket to the 30% bracket, and that 5% on new money on what's in there, that's pretty valuable, because that goes in every year, and you can do sort of smart planning for that. And then the other reason is, I don't want to play against gender lines. So this is not really about male, female, but typically there are spouses where one is involved in the finances and one is not. They've allocated resources amongst themselves about who's going to do what. And one of the spouses says, I'm going to be responsible for the money. And the other person said, great, go for it. Just tell me when we don't have any. All right. So usually there's a financial savvy spouse, and maybe that financially savvy spouse has been managing funds just fine and their investments successfully over their entire working career. But there's a chance that that financially savvy spouse dies before the non-financially savvy spouse. And so working with an advisor is a way of being able to transfer that knowledge over and to have somebody smooth that stuff over. I can't tell you how many clients come to our estate planning practice and are really enthusiastic about our client maintenance program, where we see them every year, because it gives the opportunity for the entire family, both spouses, sometimes the kids, to get to know an advisor who can help them transition from one generation to the next, from one spouse dying. And so it could be that the person who's financially savvy is actually driving that. It's not actually the non-financially savvy person that's saying, I need help. It's the financially savvy person saying, look, I've taken care of this for this long, and I know that part of my responsibility is to continue to take care of this going forward, and I want you in my family's life to make sure that that happens well, and I'm willing to give up control, and responsibility for decision making on investments and financial planning in order to make sure that I have an advisor that can help me transition from me being around to me not being around, being the financially savvy person. So I would look less at the concept of fees. I think fees are a fluid way of evaluating an advisor. Sometimes you get a lot more for somebody that charges slightly more, and so you're going to want to look at not just go bargain basement shopping, but getting an advisor in and having them help you manage taxes, as well as being there for your family throughout those transitions and making sure that things remain well planned for. Throughout that time are two great values for having an advisor. Well, look at that. We are done with the show for today. I want to thank you for joining me here on Make It Last. We publish a show every Saturday. If you like the show, share it with a friend. Let them know about it. They can do so by listening on the radio every Saturday morning at 7:30, WCTC 1450 AM, or they can subscribe on iTunes and get a podcast delivered to their phone. They can do it on iTunes, Android. Just go to makeitlastradio.com. Bunch of buttons there for you to subscribe. So that's it for this week. We're going to join you next week, and we're going to keep covering these important topics. I want to thank you for joining us. This has been Make It Last, helping you keep your legal ducks in a row and your financial nest secure, and we will see you next Saturday. Bye-bye.
The foregoing content reflects the opinions of Medina Law Group, LLC, and Private Client Capital Group, LLC, and is subject to change at any time without notice. Content provided herein is for informational purposes only and should not be used or construed as investment or legal advice or a recommendation regarding the purchase or sale of any security or to follow any legal strategy. There is no guarantee that the strategies, statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Indices are not available for direct investment. Any investor who attempts to mimic the performance of an index would incur fees and expenses, which would reduce returns. All investing involves risk, including the potential for loss of principal. There's no guarantee that any investment plan or strategy will be successful. We recommend that you consult with a professional dedicated to your needs.